as I study the life of Renee Good, I mean, she seemed like a truly lovely person, and she gave her last words were, "Hey, man, I'm not mad at you." And little did she know that seconds later she would be losing her life, but her last words were words of peace and consolation. And I just hope people lift her up because she was clearly a good one.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I'll jump right into it. ICE agents break the law every day. How can states hold agents accountable for their behavior before it escalates?
Good question. Let's kind of take it in part. So there is no there is no general immunity from criminal prosecution of federal agents. If a federal agent commits a crime, states may prosecute them. There is a limited immunity based on the Supremacy Clause of the United States, which essentially asks two questions. One is was the federal agent doing their job? And two, as they were doing their job, were they doing, was the decision that they were making necessary and a proper and appropriate for their job? If the answer to both of those questions is yes, then the case is dismissible. If the answer to either one of them is no, then the prosecution can go forward. And then also the defendant, who would be the federal agent, can remove the case to federal court. But it would be the same state prosecutor and it would be the same state law that they would be prosecuted. But you'd have a federal judge and the jury would be drawn from a federal, pool, which would be bigger than a county. And so usually if you commit a crime in Hennepin County, only Hennepin County residents would make up the jury pool. But if in a federal case, they might be drawn from all of southern Minnesota. So you could have somebody from Minneapolis, Field, which is also in Hennepin County, but you could have people from Burnsville, which is in another county. You could have people from Albert Lea. So that would be the difference. But there is no broad immunity. So when you ask me, ICE breaking laws and what can be done, one is they are subject to criminal prosecution. Now, there are some pragmatic considerations when it comes to criminal prosecution. One is investigation. You cannot prosecute people unless you have the facts to support it, and that means investigation. In the case of Renee Good, one of the problems that the federal government has kind of broken precedent and said that the states would not be allowed to be partners in the investigation, nor can they have access to the file. That does present a problem because there are protocols for thorough, high quality investigations, which can't ever be met if state officials don't have access to the bullet casings, the car, and things like that. But that doesn't mean just because you can't do everything, you can't do anything. And so we're asking the public to share information. We're gathering existing video, and we're going to do the best we can with what we have. Now, there is this other issue of lower level crimes than homicide, switching plates, things like that, other things. Yeah, these things are very concerning. And sometimes prosecutors, like for myself, I'm as your AG, I prosecute people all the time for crimes, but usually they're very serious crimes like homicides, Medicaid frauds, criminal sexual conduct in the first degree, traffic, things like that. I'm normally not going to prosecute somebody over a driver's license or a driver's plate or a license plate case. Not that, I mean, because unless it's a felony case, I might not have jurisdiction on that. But then there's this thing called prosecutorial discretion. So we're just not going to do it, you know? But it's theoretically possible. Now, but then there's this other issue of like, just what about like, just bad behavior, which may or may not violate a criminal statute. And in that situation, people like myself should, one, do know your rights educational forums for people. Two, use civil tools to hold the federal government accountable. I've sued Trump 50 times. And should use the bully pulpit by going on quality programs like yours, speaking to your audience. Thank you for having me, and things like that.
Has the appetite to move more aggressively on prosecuting these lower level charges changed since Wednesday?
I sure hope so. You should know that there are jurisdictional questions when it comes to like low level offenses. We do have jurisdiction on felony level matters, but I think that I would not be legally able to prosecute a misdemeanor. So I know people have been upset about, the license plates being switched on these ICE vehicles. I think that's probably ultimately a matter of the city attorney. I think so. So that's my 2 cents on that. And I think your question is a good one. And it might. And here's the other thing: prosecutions, like literally all of them, to a certain extent, reflect community sensibility and expectations. For good or for ill, have discretion, because there are crimes on the books that prosecutors never prosecute, and there's ones that they always prosecute. So, for example, it might well still be illegal to commit fornication in the state of Minnesota. When's the last time you saw that prosecuted? But at the same time, if somebody's dead or killed, there would be an outrage if prosecutors didn't prosecute that. So there is this discretion, but I think that as community sensibility really becomes heightened behind the behavior of ICE in our state, not just the good murder, well, I don't want to say murder, death investigation or killing. I'll say, in light of that, community sensibility may well change and be like, we want you to charge them for every wrongdoing, and that certainly is possible. You may recall years ago that people would drink and drive and they would not be prosecuted, or they'd smoke inside and they would not be prosecuted. Now they are. There was a time when domestic violence, the police show up at the house and say, husband, take a walk around the block, cool down. Whereas now somebody's going to jail, right? So community sensibility changes criminal justice response. And an event like this could well have an effect.
How might local communities pressure their local prosecutors to take on these abuses of power and outright violations of criminal and civil law by ICE agents?
Making demands just like you are now at community meetings, writing letters, sending emails, posting online, things like that. Let me just say this. In Minnesota, I mean, just saying that I feel that these cases have to be prosecuted, and communicating that consistently, I think will work. Think about it like this. Imagine a corner where you got kids going to school and going to parks, and the limit is 30 miles an hour. But you routinely got people blazing down that street 45, 50 miles an hour. And neighbor says to a local city attorney or prosecutor, you need to issue some tickets. That's going to start conducting that. That's going to not only tickets. You might want to put a speed bump. You might want to put one of those, your speed is, tracks your speed and tells you that you're going too fast, because some people are going too fast and don't really realize it. But there will be a response at that corner. I think if you speak up and tell people, we expect our public prosecutors to take action around these kind of cases, it will make a difference.
Are there any kind of additional measures or tools that prosecutors have in their toolkit in addition to pressing charges against ICE agents that could modify their behavior?
Well, yeah, I mean, as Attorney General, I have a whole set of civil remedies that we use. On January 20th, Trump said birthright citizenship's over. I sued him, we won. The next day, he turned off all federal funding. We sued him, it's back on. Then he tried to say, well, no, we're going to cut National Institute of Health by 15%. We sued him, he can't do it. Then he says that we're going to cut your FEMA grant if you don't make all your law enforcement agents into ICE agents. We won on that. Just the other day, he said we're going to cut your child care grants because we think there might be fraud, and even though we haven't proven that. We won a temporary restraining order in that. So there are a range of things that we can do to restrain the authority of the federal government. Mostly what we've been doing is not criminal prosecution, but civil prosecution, because of violations of everything from the separation of powers the 10th Amendment, a legal thing called ultra vires, which just means the federal government exceeded their authority, to violations of the Administrative Procedures Act, which means that that administrative agency is taking arbitrary and capricious action in violation of the state. So we've sued them a lot, and we're more than prepared to keep doing that.
Are there any remedies prosecutors can take against individual ICE agents, be it financial or, civil?
Yeah, depending upon the conduct of that agent, depending on what they're doing, there are a range of tools, you know, civil and like I said, criminal. We've talked about both, and then of course, and then if there's individual assaultive conduct or certain individual conduct that violates the rights of someone else, they don't have the right to use excessive force, you know. That would be judged by the Fourth Amendment, reasonable search and seizure. So yeah, we're not defenseless. What we need, however, though, is we need evidence. Every case requires evidence. Evidence is oxygen to a criminal or civil prosecution. So we need people to constantly be recording things, constantly writing down their memories, constantly holding on to documents and photographs, because one thing you can't do a civil or criminal case if you don't have any evidence. So the public can really be a big help by just evidence gathering and taking pictures. And in the uh, in the case involving Renee Good, myself and County Attorney Moriarty have asked the public to send in any and all evidence that they may have in their possession so that we can gather it and catalog it and make sure that it's maintained. And I just want to just say there is no statute of limitations on murder. Um, so uh, I think that any ICE agent who is who engages in behavior that could be described as murder, and I'm not talking about Jonathan Ross. I'm just about anybody who does something that fits in that category. The fact that Trump's not going to always be the president, so something to bear in mind.
What is your advice to other state attorneys general and local prosecutors to prevent more deaths and more dangerous behavior?
Be aggressive in terms of maintaining the guardrail. Make sure that ICE operates within the law in your state. If they don't, take them to court. Um, Try to communicate with them. Try to come to some agreement with them. Try to get them to understand that going to sensitive places like schools, hospitals, clinics, courts are bad. I mean, the ICE presence in those places is not a good thing. You could have a woman who's being domestically abused. She goes to get an order for protection, but she doesn't go because she's afraid of ICE. That could subject that family to domestic violence and domestic abuse. Somebody has an ugly, persistent cough. Actually, I'm feeling quite a bit better. No, but they don't go to the ER because they're afraid of ICE. Students need an education, need to learn, need to graduate, but they don't go to school because they're afraid of ICE. A business person opens a little tienda, in the mercado or whatever, needs to earn a living, but they don't because of ICE. So I would say that we need to use all the tools that are at our disposal to protect the public from some of the things that ICE is doing to harm our community.
Obviously, the federal government is not cooperating with the state in investigating the homicide on Wednesday of Renee Good. How is the state proceeding? Are you still trying to work with them, or are you prepared to move forward on your own?
Well, as you may know, I stood shoulder to shoulder with Mary Moriarty just the other day, and we asked the public to give us information. We're going to do the best we can with what we got, and we're going to hope that the federal government changes its mind. But as I said, this matter is not going to be over. Even when Trump's no longer, when Trump's no longer, the president. This is still going to be a live issue. And we want to preserve and gather and catalog all the evidence we can.
If you were to speak to ICE agents who are in the field right now, how would you advise them to conduct themselves following Wednesday's event?
I would tell them that, look, some of you will do the right thing because it is right. Some of you will only do the right thing if you think you're going to face a consequence. Let me assure you that you will be facing a consequence if you break the law, and that you do not have general immunity. You do not have complete immunity. You will and can be held accountable for your breaking of the law. And I will also say, one day we're going to be looking back in the moment we're in right now, just like some German families in 2025 look back and say, Grandpa, were you a Nazi? You don't want your grandchildren 20 years from now to look at you in shame because of the things that you're doing now. Trump told you that you would be getting people who commit crimes out of the country, who don't have a legal right to be in the country in the first place. 92% of the people who've been caught up have no criminal conviction. So you were sold a bill of goods in the very beginning that turns out not to be true. It's better for you to quit a job than continue to do a job that is soul numbing and demands that you commit acts that violate your sense of personal dignity and morality. And sometimes it's nobler to be unemployed than to be employed being the instrumentality of wicked government. So that's what I'd say to them.
And for leadership at Department of Homeland Security, Christine Ohm, do you have any message for them?
Open up the files, open up the access. Let's have a joint investigation. If you believe that Jonathan Ross did nothing wrong, then why not have a joint investigation so that we can all stand together and say, we've looked at this, we're sorry for the family, but there's no violation of law. I mean, that you say he didn't do anything, you shouldn't be afraid of a thorough investigation. But if he did do something, don't let his bad conduct spoil the reputation of everybody else who's in that profession. Hold him accountable for his bad conduct and show that you are fair to the whole of the American people. But I'd say we need a free, fair, open, independent, and joint investigation. And so that's what I'd say. And I'd also point out, look, if you're going to have a closed off investigation, that's a bad thing. But don't say you have a closed off investigation, but then you're releasing a tape that you think is to your benefit, when actually it's kind of not to your benefit. Release it all, access to the whole case file, or do what you said you were going to do. But cherry picking little pieces that you think help you is exactly the wrong thing to do. And it sort of indicates that you believe that Jonathan Ross is guilty. I have not said he's guilty. I have not said he's innocent. I have said let's investigate. But President Trump, Kristi Noem, and J.D. Vance seem to be saying that they don't believe in Jonathan Ross by closing off this case from a thorough investigation. If they want us to trust this investigation, open it up.